Welcome to the Deep Dive Podcast. Becoming the dad God has called you to be takes a deeper dive. Dads too often stay at surface level. So let's dive deep into today's podcast.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Dad Deep Dive Podcast. We have a great episode for you today. Joshua Artebury, one of our Suit Up Ministry board members, is here to share his experience as a dad. Joshua is an incredible man, an incredible father, an incredible husband, and he's going to share with you how, as those things, we must be strong and we must be present. And when you see Josh, you'll understand exactly why being strong is a big component of who he is. He's a big, strong guy. And as Jeff sits down with him, they have an incredible conversation, and I can't wait for you to watch it. So let's get to it.
So Joshua, man, this is awesome that we get you here to be part of this. You know, you are episode officially season 2, episode 2.
All right,
so
2 for 2.
2 for 2, brother.
Yeah.
So
is it awkward that our feet accidentally touch under the table?
No, I don't think. Just as long.
I want to know if that's cool.
Just as long as it's casual.
Yeah, that's right.
It's incidental.
That's right. I just want to acknowledge it so it's not awkward. Like if it's unspoken, it might get awkward. So I'm cool with that either.
Yeah. Hey. We're brothers.
That's right.
You know. So, man, I'm excited. I get excited in my preparation for all of these podcast episodes because I think about the potential audience. I think about who is going to hear whatever it is that resonates with them, that may be what we say in Dad University is the impetus for change, for that one change, for that one man to make maybe just one change that possibly affects in a positive way a generation. So I'm excited to hear, you know, as not only you are our very first board member, student ministry board member to be recorded. So
I thought I lost a bet. So I'm honored.
Well, you won the bet, brother.
All right, good. I like that better.
It's a victory.
I like that better.
We fight from the victory,
right?
Not for the victory.
Yeah.
And so I love your title. We're going to get to that.
Okay.
We're going to, your title is be strong, be present. I mean, I love that. I mean, so we want to get into that. But before we get into that, I want you to tell me and our listeners who you are.
Sure. Well, I'm still trying to figure that out after all these years. As I'm answering the questions that Mary Jo sent over and trying to, put that into a concise, somewhat interesting paragraph or 5. Just trying to figure out who I am but also where God is leading me, because as I wrote, from a very early age, I kind of figured out like I wasn't in control, the things I wanted to do, and I want to be in control. Mm-hmm. Like that is my constant struggle to figure out where's this road going. I like to plan. I also like to be spontaneous. But, God has definitely had a plan in my life, and I have not been in control of that much. Even as much free will as he's given me, I get steered back pretty easily. But, I was raised in Irving, Texas, diehard Dallas Cowboy fan, which is sometimes tough to admit in this town.
Well, I read that in the notes, and I decided not to hold that against you.
So we're still here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, I got to take the bad with the good.
That's right.
So
that's right.
So it's a package.
You are obligated right now. We're here. So unfortunately, we have to play Saturday night. So hopefully that outcome will be positive for me and my family. Just a quick little side note: my neighbors across the street were from Philly, and their kids would wear Philly gear, around my kids. And if it was Sunday game day, I was like, Metzger kids off the lawn in your Philly gear. Like, I'm kicking you out. And so my kids kind of learned early on too that we didn't mess around with that. But
yeah,
I loved where I grew up. I was raised by a teacher And I said single mother because I feel like she was on her own for most of the time she was raising us. My dad loved us very much, just wasn't capable of being a father, like a good father. And his alcoholism kind of took over his relationship with us and his life, really, which is sad. He had a lot of potential. We saw a lot of, he was a great sense of humor, really funny, could sing. I remember him singing country songs. And I related to him a lot. And I feel like in a lot of ways I'm just like him. But, that's a tumultuous thing to go through for a little guy. And but my mother was strong, and she took us to church. We went to the Baptist church, and kind of grew up in that church. And luckily, her mother and her family were really close. So we spent Sunday afternoons going to Mimi's house, Mimi and Papa Daddy house for Sunday supper. And so that was a great foundation for me growing up, despite not having a really good father figure.
And these were your mom's parents.
Yeah, my mom's parents were maybe 3 miles down the road, so super close. I mean, I would spend the night over there until I was probably well into junior high every Friday night. And my grandpa was really kind of the anchor, the male figure in my life. And he was very stoic and strict, and he would take me to my games on Saturday morning, and in his old pickup truck, and I could still smell it. But just getting in that pickup truck to go, that was special for me because, and I didn't even really, I'm sure I did at the time, but I didn't really, question it. Like, why didn't my dad bring me to this football game?
Right.
'Cause I saw the other kids' dads doing that. So, so we had a really good support group for my mother, and, she did the best she could on a teacher's salary, and we never went without. But I grew up in a really affluent part of Irving, which is Las Colinas. And so I saw the things that these other kids had, but I just never envied it, really. It was kind of cool to see that going on. So, I mean, it was tough. He was never abusive. He was sometimes verbally abusive, but he was just not present, and so that's why that title rings so true for me, because I had to kind of navigate life without that solid father figure.
Yeah.
Which was tough. And
was it is, we talk about, it is one thing to be present, which you talk about it being more than half the battle.
Yeah.
But what do you do when you're present? Being present just in the room doesn't cut it. No. And so I love that you be strong, be present.
Well, there's a consistency to that presence, right? Showing up for the big events isn't going to cut it either. You got to be present day in and day out. And having a father who was not really present, or sometimes present, but still wasn't there, I laugh and joke with my kids because we're present, we're in it. And, I'm like, my dad never sat down and put together a Lego set with me. My dad didn't teach me how to fish. My dad didn't do all these things that I do with my kids. And then also still fight that, well, I got to take care of me stuff. I'm spending all this time doing these things I don't want to do, sitting on the floor with my bad back and knees trying to get back up. And, but so I try not to compare, but then it also kind of fuels me to be a better dad. But that presence is hard too. Put the phone down, turn the TV off, talk to them, listen to them, ask them how their day was, but don't take, it's funny, you ask a kid, hey, did you have a good day at school? And you get a yes or no if you get an answer. Try to ask specific questions. And that's that, and not in a disingenuous way. Like, I really want to know what subjects they're interested in and what they did, and talk to them about the playground. Like, what's going on? Who's chasing who? Are you getting picked on? Are you picking on? Who's the bully? Like, how to handle these life situations that no one really taught me how to do, and I had to figure out on my own. And you make a lot more mistakes that way. Now, I want them to make mistakes, right? We learn from those. But, just teaching them those things, those little anecdotes. And I look back in the catalog of my life and what my father taught me, and it's a really short list. And I don't want to be that dad. So in a way, it was kind of a blessing for me to have a father who wasn't present, who wasn't strong, to be a better father, a better friend, a better husband, a better, business owner, whatever, because I learned from his mistakes in a really odd and difficult way. So,
Yeah, isn't it interesting that we either go one way or the other?
yeah.
You could have gone the other path, but you had a grandpa.
I did. I had uncles.
Yes.
I had uncles that were wonderful that took us camping. Probably the uncle who made the biggest impact on me was Uncle Ray. He was in Houston, married to my mom's sister. And so they were in Houston, but they would come to Dallas a lot. But I would go to Houston a lot. I would spend some summer weeks with them, and he would take me fishing, deep sea fishing and camping, and, told crazy stories that nobody believed. And he was that character, but just a real solid anchor, a good husband and father. He was a great example. I had wonderful teachers and coaches. We were, as I now start to coach my kids' little leagues, I really appreciate what those coaches went through. But Irving wasn't huge, but we had Old Irving and New Irving, which is kind of where we lived, but we would practice down in South Irving and Old Irving. And I had baseball and football coaches that would come pick me up on weeknights in North Irving and travel back to South Irving just for practices. And I think back on that, I'm like, that's just crazy. Of course, nowadays, that probably wouldn't happen. But, men that made an effort, that recognized that I needed that in my life. And so God put them in my life, and it was not lost on me. I had wonderful male teachers that were coaches or principals or just really good teachers that were positive influences on me and recognized that I might need a little more direction.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's an important message to men that are listening today, or who will listen to this podcast, that you don't always have to be the biological father to be a father figure.
That's right.
And I think as my role as an uncle, I don't think my kids are my kids, and so I want to be the very best dad I can possibly be. There might have been some other areas growing up or even now, where I've missed opportunities to be the uncle that my nephews need. But so we sometimes I think we minimize our role because we think we're just the uncle, or we're just the aunt, or we're just there's no such thing as just, and I think. It's whatever we make it. And so, man, if you're listening and you don't have kids of your own, you can be the neighborhood dad. You can be the coach. You can be the that father figure. You can be the uncle. Be that funkle. The fun guy. And and obviously it takes as they say sometimes it takes a village.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your grandpa taking you to your games on Saturday morning. When you said that, immediately I thought about my dad, who was very much involved in my life, and that he would be the one that would drop me off before the game to go get to go to the locker room and on Friday afternoons or Saturday mornings or whatever it was. And I think about how sometimes as a kid we just take that for granted.
Yeah.
But why do we remember that?
Yeah.
Why? So dads, sometimes what you think is the most insignificant time can be the memory that your kid, your son or daughter hangs on to and carries with them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. And that presence, that consistent presence, it shows up. It becomes evident. And yes, we don't always recognize that they appreciate it or even understand that they do, but we know they will, right? I know there comes a time when I won't be there, right? And as a 49-year-old with a 4-year-old, I do not recommend that you do the math for how old you will be when they graduate high school, right?
Yeah.
If I'm blessed enough to be there, but at some point they will remember because they're little sponges,
right?
And so that also lets us know that we can mess up, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to be perfect. we can strive for being great, and but just being present and talking to them and being consistent in your beliefs and your convictions will go so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the studies show it. You know, we're in a difficult world, and a lot of men are divorced or estranged from their families. And, you know, my brother-in-law is going through a really difficult time right now with his wife and alienation of the kids. And I'm like, you just have to continue to pray and be present. Show up every Thursday, whether they're there or not. And that's the encouragement I give to any of those dads that are struggling in that situation. And that's a whole other podcast that I'd love to do. But to just don't give up. No one ever said this job was easy, but it is important.
Yeah.
So they will appreciate it, and they'll remember it.
Yeah.
And so, but the beautiful part about that is we don't have to have that glory. Like, I don't have to hear that. I don't have to hear, you know, I love hearing it, but you know, there's going to come a time when I won't be able to hear it, but I pray to God that somebody will. And so what my kids say about me is my legacy. And I think that's important. So dads, if you're listening out there, just don't quit, be persistent.
And I love the fact that you point out, you know, I think older dads and grandpas get it because they start looking ahead, like you were talking about, don't do the math. Whereas if we're 20-somethings or 30-somethings, we think we have all the time in the world. And what happens is you look up, and you can probably even relate to this with your oldest, who is what, 12.
She's 12 now,
so yesterday, it was probably just like yesterday that you just brought her home.
Yeah, her Aubrey. She's kind of a boy's name,
but now she's 12.
Yeah.
And so you think about how fast did that go? Well, you know, when you were 37, 38, you know, you were probably thinking, okay, still young, still, you know, and you're not forecasting out. Well, you know, I get to be 57 and I had my first granddaughter. And so I started doing the calculations and I'm thinking, okay, am I going to be there for high school graduation? Will I be there to see her get married? Will I, you know? And so I can get emotional and start thinking about that. So you got to start thinking, okay, so there is no time more important than right now.
You said it, and you can't say it enough. And the best advice I ever got as a new dad was don't wish it away. And I had to think about that for a second. Wish it away. And so we as humans and as dads and just friends, whatever situation in life, we say, man, I can't wait until. And that simple phrase, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but don't fast forward, right? You're going to miss the stuff. Like, so, you know, I tell these new dads that are my friends that kind of, you know, gave me a hard time that I used to go out with, and they were single and now they have kids. And I'm like, dude, don't wish it away. All right. Enjoy every minute. The diaper phase is temporary. The terrible 2s, 3s, and 4s is temporary, and you will get through that.
Yeah.
And when you do, it's great. Every stage is wonderful. So just enjoy the stage. And I feel like we took a million pictures and videos, and then I look back, I'm like, we didn't take enough.
Yeah.
So I always encourage people to do that. Take everything, fill all the media up because you'll forget things they say that made you laugh.
Yeah.
The silliest things, or, you know, just those situations. And so, you know, we need to be in the moment, and that's part of being present.
I remember when my daughter went to college, and I stood in her room like she was dead, like I had lost her in an empty room.
Yeah.
And I don't think I wasn't mourning necessarily the fact that she had gone to college. I was mourning that phase of life was over. And like you said, when the diaper stage is over, in some ways, thankfully, it's over.
Yeah.
But guess what? Now you're on to the next stage of life, and rarely ever to turn back when you have that last one. So I love that advice. Don't wish it away. I think we could. That could be a whole nother podcast.
It could.
And don't fast forward.
Yeah.
Live in the presence. Be strong. Be present. So you went to A&M.
Yes.
And you were a journalism major.
Yeah.
And I think that I was thinking about when you were talking about the questions that you ask your kid.
Yeah.
You were going through the 5, who, what, when, where, why, how.
Yeah.
Your journalism. I wonder if that gave you kind of the
Probably.
And I was also thinking, well, you have a mom who was a teacher who, all good teachers want to know what makes kids tick beyond, the classroom. So you want to know who the person, who the students are in front of them.
Everything's an interview almost, like I'm inquisitive by nature, and I want to teach my kids to be inquisitive and be critical thinkers. And I think part of that has to do with my mother being a teacher. But, it's funny. She was an English teacher, and, I occasionally have bad grammar, and sometimes, I put my foot in my mouth. But she let us be us. She was raised us to be very independent. And so that was good and bad. She just didn't press me about my homework and my grades and the things, she just let me figure it out. And so in a lot of ways, I appreciate that. But in some ways, I'm like, man, I probably needed a little more guidance through school. I didn't realize at Texas A&M that you had a guidance counselor until like my junior year. We went, my roommate and I, who we grew up with very similar lives since the 6th grade, Joe Gaddis, we figured out a lot on our own in college. We went to parents' weekend, like initiation weekend, by ourselves without our parents. Which is a kind of a sad commentary, when you think about starting out that phase of your life. And so, we've got a lot of anecdotal stories, but everything's an interview. We want to be inquisitive. We need to figure out why. I wanted to be a sports writer, and I was a sports writer until I got my first job offer out of college at the Bryan College Station Eagle. Like $17 an hour on like the obituary desk and night desk, and I was like, I can make more money than this working at the bar. And so I realized pretty quickly, I'm like, well, what about selling advertising? Is that a better deal? So that kind of steered my career. And oddly enough, my wife is also an Aggie. She's way younger than me, and she was a journalism major. And so we joke about it because we went to an engineering college with a really sad journalism program that they cut shortly after she graduated. And I think they brought it back finally, but it wasn't even a degree. I'm like, I had to, show people my degree to say, no, this really was a degree in journalism. But yeah, so I still love to write, and I still love to communicate that way. And it's just, it's in my blood.
So 4 kids. 4 to 12.
Yeah.
So God bless your wife, your spouse.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So what's the hardest part about raising, besides the fact that it's 4?
Yeah.
What's the hardest part?
It's a lot of hard stuff. I as I told you, I didn't want kids. I didn't see myself. I liked kids, but I was kind of indifferent. My friends would have their kids around, and they inevitably crawl on me, and I'm the big fun guy, but I'm also like, okay, get out of my space. These kids are loud, and they're and I get kind of claustrophobic. The hardest part is probably giving enough attention to each of them at the right time. That's so difficult, especially with our world, and I feel I have a business, and we're going on our 9th year, 8 years in business, which has been amazing, but also the most difficult thing I've ever done at the same time is trying to raise these kids. And for the first 6 or 7 years, we didn't have any money, but we kept having babies, and knew that it would eventually work out. But, part of that was I worked at Memorial Hermann, and then I left that job. It was a great job, stable job, and I took another job at a manufacturer representative for hearing aids. But I was traveling all over the country, and 4 days a week, every week. And I had a 4-year-old and 2-year-old girl at home, and we had a baby on the way, Major, our firstborn, on the way. And Katie's like, you got to come home. Like, it's just too much, and you're stressed out, and you're having like heart palpitations. It ruined my weekend. I couldn't even enjoy our weekends. And she's like, you got to come home. And so she was amazing. She still is amazing. She recognizes things in me and sees them before I see them, and has a way of telling me that I can appreciate and not resent her for. So she brought me back home, and then I just took a regular job that wasn't. I knew it was a stepping stone. We just wanted to come home, have a job, kind of figure out my next move, and that was in the fall of 2013. And I met an old buddy for a drink that I worked with at Memorial Hermann, and hadn't talked to him in 2 years. And he said, "Hey, I got this opportunity," and he was just telling me for himself, to buy into the sleep lab. And what do you think? And I'm like, "I think it sounds great. Let's do it." So he said, "All right, come do it with me." We invested in like 2 months. We knew these guys were not the guys for us. And so we decided he and I were going to do it on our own. And so we started the process of separating from them. Well, the baby's due February of 14. I come home in January. I'm like, "Hey, babe, I quit my job, and we're starting that business I was telling you about." She's like, "You realize this baby's going to be here in 2 weeks?" I'm like, "It'll be fine. Everything's going to work out," which I always say, and it always annoys her, but it always does. It always works out to God's plan. Like we thought it was crazy, but it's been His plan, and she supported me through all of that. Didn't even question. I mean, she questioned it, but she's like, "Okay, you're going to do what you're going to do. I trust you. You haven't let me down yet, and God will provide for us, and you can always go get another job." So that was her attitude, and man, I needed to hear that, and I needed that just subtle support. And so she is amazing, and she has pushed me for all these kids. So I do resent her for that, but the blessings are like, and the other part too that you talk to these kids about and other people, like that first kid you love so much, and you're like, how can God, how can I have any more space for love in this heart for anything else? Because this is the greatest thing I've ever felt in my lifetime. And then the next baby comes, and it's like, okay, here's the space opens up for that kid. Like, and I joke about her. I'm like, okay, two's good. And then there's three. Three's good. And then now we're at 4. And she's like, "You didn't want 2 more." She goes, "What would we be without these boys?"
Yeah.
And you can't even imagine them not being there.
Yeah.
So that's that. It's I can't comprehend it. My Aggie brain cannot comprehend the things that God puts in our life and the spaces that He creates for us to appreciate. And I can't even fathom not being a believer, because to me, those things are so amazing and they're so indescribable that it's a bigger leap to just think those just spontaneously happen because 2 meteors collided or whatever.
Yeah.
Like this is design. You can't deny it.
Yeah.
So that's a digression, a really long answer to your very short question.
No.
The hardest part is giving them enough attention that they feel appreciated and loved, because that time isn't. It's finite. I don't have that time. I make time, but when I'm with them, I feel guilty about not doing the things that I have for this business, which also is like having 17 or 20 kids, however many employees we have right now. We're responsible for their lives.
Right.
That's huge. Like they depend on our success.
Yeah.
And so then when I'm there, I'm like, oh man, all this stuff I'm missing. And that's the hardest part for me, is that time. So that's why being present and being strong is so important, because the time that you're there, why waste it?
Right.
It's like you're here, so just spend it.
Yeah.
But it's still tough. I mean, that's easy for me to say.
Well, and it's not always quantity. They say it's the quality time that you spend, that you make the most of that wherever you are. Yeah. And that goes back to be strong, be present. And I think it's so simple, but yet so hard. It's if it was easy to do, I don't know why we wouldn't do it. I mean, we have to. It's what we put into it. It's our intentionality. It's becomes our focus. But I do have some good news for you.
Oh, I love good news.
When you become a grandpa, I mean,
How do I feel like one already?
Oh my gosh. I'm with you. Yeah. We want every man that's a dad to be the dad that God's called them to be, and to be able to say, "I can't imagine my world without my kids." And I can't remember my life before having a son. I have one son and one daughter, 15 months apart, and we didn't. And I had mine. I was 29, 30. So we always tell people we made up time on the second one. You know, the first one was a little bit later than some people have, but the second one we kind of made up for lost time. So, but then that was all we had. We had one boy and one girl, and it was really easy for me because they are a boy and a girl to treat them differently, but the same.
Right.
And you probably run into that.
That's also difficult.
Yeah. Because
managing those personalities.
Yeah, you have two and two, right?
2 and 2.
Yeah. So, but you just think that you've experienced the greatest feeling. And but when I became a grandpa at 57 and Tessa Kay came to this world, I tell her to this day, she's 4, I said, you're a game changer. You're grandpa's game changer. You changed my life. And sometimes, in some ways that's exciting. In other ways, my message would be, don't wait till you're 57 to realize that how. But and she says, Grandpa, you always tell me that. I love that. I love that she knows that I say that, and she goes, and she gives it back to me. She goes, Grandpa, you're my game changer. So, but then I had like you, how do I find enough love in my heart for the next one? And I do. I have a second one, a third one, and so two girls and a boy as grandpa. And silly grandpa, by the way, and which is what they call me. But
that's great.
But there's more to it. There's even more to it. And so you talked a little bit about this maintaining the work and your life balance. And I think balance is the key.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that word this morning. Everybody has not everybody, but the thing is not resolution anymore. It's now my word for the year,
right.
And so I was thinking, I picked agape this year and unconditional love, right. But I was thinking, balance. When I try to interpret or decide or discern what word I need this year is where am I lacking the most? And typically that's what I need to work on. So I think balance is hard for all of us and men.
Yeah.
And so how you juggle and the responsibility that you mentioned of the 17 that you have in the workplace,
and my business partner and his family, and we don't take that lightly. It's difficult. I don't know the answer, because every day is different.
Yeah.
And every day has its challenges, and you run into things that you're planned for, right? But then you sit down for your plan and to work it that morning, and then these little fires pop up that you had no idea were going to happen, and then you got to address them. And so it's a constant shuffle, but it's more of a mindset, right? So, it took a really long time for me to learn that it's not going to the things that I have on my desk are not going to consume me so much that I can't deal with some of them tomorrow, right? It's not going to end. The business is not going to die, right? So you have to learn how to prioritize, and prioritization is important. I had a boss early on, a wonderful boss, Ray Pikowski. He's still at the Expo Group in Irving, Texas, and old Chicago guy, and just started this wonderful trade show business. And he was a father figure and a mentor, and just he was successful. He was a self-built guy, so I always admired him. And I worked directly for him, and he would just pile it on, man. He read all the trade magazines. He was in the know, and he had all these ideas, and I was like his dumping ground for his ideas. And so every morning I'd come into a new stack of articles with handwritten notes, and this would be great. Let's do this. Call this guy. And then I'd be like hungry, right? I'm 28 years old. I'm really digging this job. Cool travel. But at some point the pile keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And back then I didn't have any, I could work all night. But I'd meet with him every Friday morning. He's like, okay, how'd you do this? How'd you do this? There's this accountability that I also had never had. And I'm like, Ray, I can't do this, and this. He's like, well, why didn't you say something? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and he knows the answer, right? He's just playing this chess game with me that I am oblivious to. But he taught me, he's like, look, I will give you everything that you tell me you can handle. And the minute you tell me you can't, then I'll help you prioritize. And which was amazing advice for me in turn of learning how to delegate and also prioritize. And half the stuff were just crazy wingnut ideas that he didn't even really want to do. He was just testing me to see what I would come up with and how far I could go without breaking. So I learned to not be scared to say, I can't do this. I need your help. Can you help me prioritize what you just put on my desk? Because I can only do 53 of these things and not 68 or whatever the number is. So that's a big deal. And then, scheduling, having a wonderful support group, having an amazing wife. And I realize not everybody has those things, man. I appreciate that. And I don't take it for granted. But I think learning that balance and trying to figure it out, not being afraid to fail, and then making the time, because you can also, wish that you had more time with your family or wish that you had more time with your work or office or to get the things done. Well, there's only 24 in the day. We got to get some sleep in there, right? So just really working every single day. It doesn't stop. And new challenges come up. So not being overwhelmed, learning that, hey, this can wait. It's not going to kill me. And then praying a lot. And it's funny because I feel like I'm the worst prayer. And growing up Baptist, you learn, man, those guys can pray. They go to praying school. Like the things that y'all can say. And when you're talking to God, and it's like, at the end of the day, man, God doesn't care. It's a conversation, and their thoughts, and you just let God know, man, I need your help here. Open a door, and I may not even realize that door's open, but guide me, let me do your will, let me be open to your will. Although I just do those little prayers, and so that's probably the best advice I could give. I think the person who figures out that life balance, and I know people are trying to, but first of all, I think they're full of it. Well, there's no formula that works.
I think really the big part is just acknowledging that you are out of balance, that you need balance, and that I don't know if we ever perfect balance, but I think it's the striving towards balance, working towards balance. That hey, I need to spend a little bit more time here, or a little bit more time there. And then letting God, like you said, lead you, and having that faith. Because
I'm not in tune. I have really, really bad ADHD. I'm not in tune with my body necessarily. I'm not even really I don't feel like I'm in tune with a lot of things that go on. I've just always been a free spirit my entire life. I kind of spontaneously go through the motions and trying to, these ideas and chasing these squirrels. Well, I've got to reel that in, but eventually the things that you care about are going to tell you before they break. They give you a lot of warning, right? You get signs. So if you listen to your children, if you listen to your wife, if you listen to your employees, if you listen to, your bank statement, those things are evident. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So be in tune with those things, at least like the things that you care about the most. Yeah. And the more in tune you are with them and the more you listen, the more you can prioritize. Yeah. And some things are going to get disappointed. Like, we don't want to disappoint our kids. Like, I want them to have everything, but I also want them to learn, because I overcame so much disappointment and so many obstacles and didn't have things given to me. And it made me better along the way. And so I don't want these, I don't want my kids to be soft and growing up in the woodlands, man, they see everything and all this stuff. Yeah. And so that's a tough thing to deal with too. Right. Like how do you make these kids realize like this is special?
This is not always the
norm.
This
is not real life.
Yeah.
We're in the land of champagne and cupcakes. Yeah. And we need to pull it back to, milk and rice and beans sometimes.
Well, you said a couple things. You were talking about your mentor and that you just let it stack up without saying anything. And he said, well, why didn't you tell me? Yep. So that's a lesson for men. That sometimes we just need to say, we need help. Yeah. We need each other. We need to have other people holding us accountable.
Pride, man.
Yeah. We need to ask for directions, And then you said, listen. Yeah. So those are two things we're not very good at. We don't ask question. We don't ask for help.
Yep.
And we don't listen very well. I mean, that's a stereotypical.
But it's just the way we are, and it's so true. And it will bite you. And I get it. It's hard. I'm the most stubborn, control freak around. And so you got to let that go. You got to let go your pride and your ego, and listen to your wife. A lot of times they're right. A lot of times they aren't. But talk about it. And have difficult conversations, knowing that, okay, it's going to be tough, but let's get through it. But yeah, man, you got to, selfish people, and we're all naturally selfish sinners, right? That's just the way we are. We're worried about self. Well, so overcoming that selfishness, because you ultimately think, why didn't marriages work out? Or why am I not a good father? Or why am I a bad employee? Or why are these things happening? Well, selfish, pride and ego are like, man, and this as a coach, like every locker room I ever played in, it says pride, but it also says, team and selfless and heart. And when you start thinking about team, you got to give up yourself. So that's the best way to be a dad and a good husband is to give up yourself, but still have that identity that, you still got to be strong in all your beliefs and convictions.
Well, there's a difference between having pride and being prideful.
Yes.
And which sometimes we do create the situation, the scenario when we're constantly coaching young men to have pride in what they do, but not to the point that they forget. You don't want to ever forget yourself, but the great thing I love about football is that, one of the greatest team sports there is, and so many life lessons that parallel what we do on a daily basis in our business, in our families, in our work, whatever, in our play. But hey, I wanted to, before we kind of close up a little bit, I wanted to go back to, you have a statement in my pre-notes that you forgave your father. But you're still are resentful. So, explain that a little bit.
Yeah, that's been a lifelong struggle because, it took me a long time to get to that point where I could forgive him, and I think I needed to do that for me, but he needed to hear it for him. It was kind of late. I mean, all that water's under the bridge in a lot of ways. And so he tried to be a dad after he became sober. And I was like, man, that's not really happening here. I'm 20 something years old, and I'm already well on my way. And I was stubborn and prideful. And I said, but I've got to get past that. And so I did forgive him. But the resentful part is, I think that's just my human nature and part of my heart of just kind of going, man, I wish you'd have worked harder. I wish you to tried a little bit harder for your boys. And my brother had a lot more struggles than I did. He was older. He was 16 when mom finally kicked him out. But, I'm thankful that God gave me the strength to overcome what he did. But it's very possible, like you said early on, I could have gone the other way. There's so many opportunities for me to dive deep down the wrong path. And so the resentment comes from now that I'm a father, and I see how important it is to be a part of their lives, and that he didn't do those, even the little stuff, like he just gave up. And so I'm just disappointed. And that's hard. It's hard to get over. I don't hate him. I still love him. But I'm just kind of mad at him. Like, man, you could have done better. I'm disappointed. I still have dreams about him sometimes. He died in 2003. I still dream about him in just really weird ways, and I think about him all the time. We named Aubrey, her middle name is James, after him. I mean, he was a big part of my life, but also I am who I am, and I call him like I see him, and he's just a bad dad.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me not to think about all those things as, when other men taught me how to fish or change my wool or, do those things that he never taught me how to do.
Yeah.
But I still love him. He was a Marine. He was a cop. He had a lot of great qualities, but he was a bad dad. So I don't know. I don't know that it's bad that I don't know if I harbor it or what you want to say. I've never been in therapy. I don't know if that's still a thing, but I own it, and it makes me better.
Yeah, I think, again, it gets back to that acknowledging.
Yeah.
So many times we acknowledge only the positive things in our lives, but we don't take the time, and I think as men, to really acknowledge the pain and the hurt and the sorrow, and then you use that for the positive. And I think you say resent. You probably resent may be a little bit harsh, but but it is reality. It's not like resenting to the point that it paralyzed you.
Right.
It's resent that it actually gave you power to become the dad and the man that you are, the husband and the father that you are, and the friend. And I think if we deny that we don't really fully become who God wants us to be, our fullness. And but at the same time, forgiving, and letting that go, because as you mentioned, every one of us falls short, and
look, it's okay. That's the part, it's like, okay, I recognize those things that he had shortfalls in. I think a lot of it is I see so much of myself, or him and myself, and the things that I go through just in my Josh brain every day that are like him. And I want to take the good stuff and kind of keep that, and I want to take the bad stuff and keep it out. But you're right. You got to recognize the bad stuff in order to deal with it or fix it.
Yeah, you can't make a plan if you don't acknowledge the issues.
Yeah.
So what would be that advice that you would give to men that are listening here on this podcast at Dad U that came from a broken home? What would be that? What would be the lesson? Or
gosh, and it's so tough, and it breaks my heart, to see these relationships crumble for bad decisions, for selfishness, for all the things, and really ultimately the kids suffer, right? And I've still got friends that are in really bad relationships with young children, and I'm always talking to them about you gotta stick it out. You gotta fight for the kids, and you need to work with your partner. And probably the hardest part of that is selfishness. The selfishness is what keeps most of that stuff from happening. So you can't just think of yourself. You just kind of gotta get through it. And it's just like every day, we all have stuff, man. We all have aches and pains and demons and all the things. And so if you dwell in it, your life is going to be that. It's going to be miserable. The people around you are going to be miserable. And you're creating a cycle for these kids to be miserable. So map that out and see what that looks like. And so the genesis is not you, but it really is now. All that stuff's gone. Your old man or your broken home, it's all happened. So learn from it. The more you dwell on it, the longer that cycle is going to perpetuate. So be the new Genesis. Start over. Be selfless. Work on it every single day and be better, because when you map out the cycle of what is to come, the statistics are completely clear. There's no doubt. And there's going to be a few that break through, but you're creating a cycle forever of crappiness. Yeah. So do you really want to be that? No, you don't want to be that.
Yeah.
So be better.
Yeah.
That's all I can say, man. And that's every day.
Yeah.
And we're going to stumble. We're going to fail. I've been trying to lose 50 pounds for 5 years because I gained the baby weight,
Yeah.
And so I just did, but every day it's still new. I got to fight through it. I got to fight the struggles and trying to be a better example for my kids. It's tough.
Yeah.
But you got to be tough. You got to fight it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I'd say. The one other thing I did want to talk about real quickly is I don't even remember how I found it. But before, a buddy of mine, my college roommate, gave it to me when we were expecting Aubrey. and it's a book by Meg Meeker called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. And I give that book to every new dad of daughters. It's just, and I wish everybody could read it. And she's a pediatrician who's done all the research for the last 30 years. And what happens with dads who are not strong fathers for their daughters. And the studies are over and over again, strong fathers have less promiscuous daughters. They have more responsible daughters. They have daughters that are less likely to choose the wrong man, which is a horrible cycle. They're less likely to use drugs and alcohol. They're less likely to, you name it. And it's just a powerful book. And she has a great YouTube series too that I've started to watch again. But I recommend that. I recommend to read books. You talk about needing help. Like there's so much amazing material out there for fathers. I mean, obviously start with the Bible, but dude, the Bible's tough, man, especially for a newbie, right? And so yes, get in church, get in a small group, but read something or watch videos of something that will help you be better.
Yeah.
That's it.
There is, and we just finished a podcast, and we talked about this in the podcast prior to yours. There's no owner's manual for I mean, there was, when a baby was born, you come home from the hospital. There's no, you don't reach for the glove box, and there's this step 1, step 2, because it's all different, and you've had 4, and every single time it's different, and because they're all different, and the circumstances are different, and what worked for me doesn't always work for somebody else, but it's that acknowledgement of the need, the humility that we don't have to have all the answers, and just seek, because there is so much opportunity and information out there now.
There's no excuse.
Yeah.
Right. There's no excuse. And my wife tried to make me read all the books, prior to the thing, and then there was this crazy scenario, which I'll tell you offline. Of something I noticed about the daughter, and she's like, well, if you'd have read the book, you would have known. And I'm like, I feel like I read that book. Maybe you didn't listen to it or something, but there's no excuse now. Yeah. And really not.
And the power of the dad were the words, the power of the dad to the daughter, the power of the dad to the son. The son needs to know that he's good enough, and he needs to hear that he has what it takes, and he needs to hear it from his dad.
Yes.
And the daughter needs to know that she's beautiful and precious and valuable, and she needs to hear that from the dad.
They also need affection, which is hard for a lot of men. Physical affection, hugs are okay, right? And just touching, holding hands, things that you should be doing with your wife anyway, right? And so, my wife and I are two of the least affectionate people in the world. So, we have our moments, but sometimes we have to work at that as a couple, but also with our kids. And we tell them every day, they all think they're the favorite. Each one of them think they're my favorite, and I love that.
Yeah.
And they'll argue with each other. Yeah. They're all my favorite.
Yeah.
We know that.
Yeah.
But I tell them they're my favorite, and I just tell them not to tell the other ones. And so, people think whatever. You think whatever. But that works for us, man.
Yeah.
And because they all are my favorite. And so, when we could do a whole thing about relationships, being a strong husband, how important that is, especially for the daughters, to see you be affectionate with your wife. And so, we'll intentionally kiss in front of them, with an eye looking at them to see how they react. And they're watching.
Yeah.
And they may say, "Ooh, gross," but they love it. They love that their parents are happy together. And so sometimes you have to fake that.
Yeah. Well, that gives them that security.
That's another awkward touch.
Yeah, that was the touch.
We need a touch tally in there.
A little bit. Okay, so last thing.
Okay.
I want to flip the scenario from the father that came from the broken home to the father that created the broken home.
Yeah.
So because there might be some men that are listening that are saying, okay, I'm the guy that caused all that.
Yep.
How do I turn the page? How do I flip this? Is it too late?
Well, there's two scenarios to that too. There's the father who did create it for sure. Then there's a lot of fathers who didn't. that are still suffering through that broken home and going through that pain. And so again, guys, you have to get help, because that's a whole other set of complicated issues that we're not really dealing with: rejection and, hurt and not seeing your kids. I will tell you this is probably the best advice I can give any man who was single for a long time and then got married and maybe was used to dating women or whatever. But when you put yourself in a bad situation, you're opening up the opportunity for a bad situation to happen. And for me, who I've been in bad situations before, and I've been in really tempting, tough situations, but the thought that another man could raise my children is a powerful thought for me, right? And so I know that I don't think anybody wants that. And so if that's happened, it's difficult, but you've got to be open to that new relationship, right? You're still the father, and it's still important for those children to have their father. Even if their surrogate father is great or not great, it doesn't matter. It's even more important if they're not great. But having as much of a relationship with your ex-wife as possible, still being the father, being open and fighting for your time. Like I said, this is a whole other side, but the first thing is you need help. And if that's a guidance counselor, an attorney, or somebody to talk to who's been through it, because those are just a whole other set of dynamics that we're not used to dealing with and that we're not always equipped to deal with.
Yeah.
But, I told my brother-in-law again, I told him, I said, don't quit. Don't ever quit. They see it, and especially with alienation, which is a whole other thing. But one day they're going to come out of it and they're going to know that you never gave up. So don't give them the opportunity to think that you did. Right. So, again, that's being persistent, strong, and consistent.
Yeah, so many times a divorce is an excuse for the man, or an excuse that the man uses to not be involved in their kid's life. And when in fact, being divorced and devoted is so important. We tell our men that the best thing they can do for their kids is to love the kid's mom. But we also know that things happen.
Right.
And although you may not always be the husband and wife, you will always be the dad. Always.
And so recognize what maybe caused it, right? That's hard to do. That's self-reflection. That's admitting that maybe you were wrong, or you were wrong a lot, and that you were probably being selfish. And so again, selfishness is the root of it. And so get rid of it. You got to be selfless. And I'm not talking to the dads who don't want that relationship, because I have a lot of other strong opinions about those guys. These are the guys that really are searching for that relationship again with their kids, or establishing it. And the selfishness, I think, is the biggest part. You got to get past that. You got to be selfless. And reach out. And I was resentful for a lot, but we would see him every Wednesday night. We would meet at this really crappy burger place called Burger Works. It was an old Whataburger. And but we would meet there, and that was kind of our time to reconnect. And for him, and I give him credit. Like he was persistent. He recognized that he was wrong. And I told you this, the day that she kicked him out, he became sober. And then he stopped smoking a year later. It's like, people that do that cold turkey, I give him a lot of credit. And so he was persistent. And he was, the other thing too, it's easy to give a guilt trip. Try not to do that. Don't try to make your kids feel guilty, although it's natural to do. Maybe a little bit, but you don't want them to resent you more, right? You just got to be open to the time that you get and take advantage of that time that you get.
Yeah.
And if you get time with them, don't waste it on you.
Yeah.
Find out what they want to do. Find out what makes them happy. And if you have a new relationship, don't necessarily bring that new relationship around so early. So there's just a lot of things that we can do better, but that's part of finding help. Like, how do we do this? Talk to dads who have been through it.
Yeah.
And find a mentor to help you navigate those first 2 or 3 years, because that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Right?
Be strong,
Yeah.
be present.
Be strong, be present, be strong in all your convictions and your beliefs, and be confident in them, and don't waver. You know, be understanding that you know, maybe that's hard for them to understand, but you got to talk to them. You got to talk to them, man. Ask them questions. Let them understand why you believe the way you believe.
Yeah.
Let them understand why, you know, God is the center point of your all relationships, and understand what that means. You know, because they hear all these buzzwords in church, you know, and they may even hear all your buzzwords about politics. But you got to give them the opportunity to think critically about why, and in real ways they can understand. Because you're talking to kids who don't understand the nuances of all the difficult things we're going through, right? So get on their level, talk to them, ask them questions, and give them the opportunity for you to teach them, right?
Yeah.
Dig a little deeper.
Absolutely.
So-
Absolutely. Hey, Josh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being, believing in Suit Up Ministries and what we're doing, the vision, and enough to be a part of our board. But most of all, thank you for being here today and being the husband and the daily active, devoted dad that you are. And I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Again, thanks for being the dad.
Love what you're doing. Love the ministry. I love the opportunity to help other men who are struggling. You know, just a lot of stuff, a lot of difficult things to be a man.
Yeah.
And we're underappreciated in a lot of ways, but we got to fight for what we love, what we believe in. And ultimately, that's our relationships with our children and making them. So I'm passionate about that. We can talk about that anytime you want.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Thank
All right.
you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.